Hey guys, tonight we slip into the echoing chill of a medieval castle, and instead of sitting by the fire with a goblet of mulled wine like some privileged lord, you're dragged down into the dungeon where prisoners shivered through nights colder than you'd care to imagine. The stones are slick, the air smells of iron and mildew, and each exhale hangs in the air like a ghost refusing to move on. You settle on rough straw, staring at dripping walls while some part of your brain mutters, "You probably won't survive this." So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below with your location and local time. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stones close in around you. Medieval dungeons were rarely designed for comfort. They were designed as afterthoughts, cut into castle foundations, or left as vaulted cellars where wine once aged before being repurposed to age prisoners instead. You run your fingertips across the wall and feel that damp sheen of condensation. Every breath chills you further, and the cell gives nothing back. Historians still argue whether these cells were ever intentionally constructed as places of suffering, or whether the suffering simply happened by accident of poor design and poorer priorities. Either way, you're the one stuck here, pressed between frost and fate. You crouch on your haunches, breath fogging before your lips, and realize the ceiling sweats tiny droplets. They plop down one by one, not in a soothing way, but in the kind of slow rhythm that convinces your nervous system you'll never get a proper night's sleep. Above you, faint thuds of boots suggest guards walking the battlements. You know there are mapgigorton, roaring hearths somewhere overhead, glowing coals, roasted meats, tankards of ale, but those luxuries belong to the world of free men. Down here, the warmth never arrives. To distract yourself, you study the faint scratches in the mortar. Some desperate soul before you carved marks, maybe days or weeks counted, maybe simple shapes of longing, crude houses, suns, faces. The historian in you whispers that graffiti has always been the poor man's diary. One fact stands out. In the Tower of London, actual names remain carved in the walls, etched deep enough that centuries of damp couldn't erase them. You run your hand across the markings and imagine a long-dead fellow sufferer trying to record that they existed, even as the cold gnawed at their bones. Your teeth chatter. You're wearing thin wool, maybe, a tunic that in summer would serve just fine, but in this weather it's about as helpful as a paper umbrella in a hailstorm. The guards didn't care to dress you in fur, indigo, saffron, russet. Those dyes were for nobles strutting in daylight, not for you crumpled in darkness. Instead, you gather your knees to your chest and tuck your chin in, one of the simplest survival postures. Conserve warmth, lose less heat to the endless draft swirling through cracks in the walls. Funny thing is, modern science calls it the fetal position. Turns out, medieval misery was ahead of its time in ergonomics. Somewhere in the distance, a rat squeaks. It scurries across your foot, tail brushing your ankle like a disgusting ribbon. You flinch, but then remind yourself, better rats than nothing. At least the vermin bring scraps of warmth and scraps of company. Archaeologists digging old castle dungeons often uncover rat skeletons mixed with human bones. The conclusion is obvious. Where people went, the rats followed, feeding on waste, crumbs, even the prisoners when desperation pushed too far. Don't worry though, tonight this rat just wants the crumb of barley bread you dropped earlier. He drags it away into a corner, and you almost envy his tiny fur coat. As you adjust on the straw mat, you wonder about sleeping arrangements in better chambers. Nobles upstairs often slept in curtained beds, rich hangings trapping warmth, feather mattresses soft enough to lull the crankiest night. You, in comparison, curl on straw that smells like damp horse. Yet there's irony here. Feather mattresses were often so infested with lice that prisoners downstairs might have had only slightly more scratching to do. Historians still argue whether straw bedding was replaced regularly or left to rot. Either way, you shift, and the prickling against your skin tells you that someone above didn't tick bedding maintenance off their medieval to-do list. You close your eyes and imagine heat. Sometimes imagination is survival. You recall how peasants in villages banked fires overnight, covering embers with ash so they'd still glow by morning. In your mind, you see orange sparks under dark ash, and you almost feel the phantom warmth. But when you open your eyes, you're met only with black stone and the faint reflection of torchlight leaking beneath the door. No embers, no comfort, just the slow pulse of cold creeping into your marrow. You shift to lying flat, pressing your back against the wall, curious if stone holds any memory of daytime warmth. For a fleeting second, maybe, you sense residual heat, but it's only your mind trying to trick you into hope. Medieval walls were thermal nightmares, thick enough to block sunlight, porous enough to wick moisture straight to your skin. If you were upstairs, sunlight might seep into the stone, releasing at night like a primitive radiator. But down here, in the belly of the fortress, no sun ever reaches. You are sleeping in permanent midnight. The drip of water continues. You count them. 1, 2, 3. Your mind drifts. Somewhere between drips, you consider that prisoners before you might have died simply from hypothermia, long before executions or starvation had a chance. Medical historians suspect hypothermia wasn't even recognized as a condition, just another melancholy chill blamed on bad air or divine judgment. No medieval doctor came running with blankets. Instead, they'd prescribe bleeding or herbs. Yes, imagine being cold enough to shake apart, and your doctor says, "Let's drain more blood." That's one of your 3 jokes tonight, delivered with sarcasm thick as the straw beneath you. Another sound interrupts, the clank of keys. A guard walks by. He doesn't stop, doesn't peer in, but the faint torchlight he carries glows through the crack of your door. For a second, your cell transforms. Golden light reflects in puddles. Frost sparkles. Your own shadow dances across the wall. Then he passes, and darkness clamps back down. The cruel thing is, warmth is just a corridor away. Firelight exists. You can smell the smoke on his cloak. But it is not for you. It is for him, for those above, for anyone but you. You draw your arms tighter, tuck your chin deeper. The night stretches longer than any you've known. Your body trembles, not from fear, not anymore, but from cold so deep it becomes your heartbeat. Historians still argue whether guards ever pitied prisoners enough to throw down a cloak or sneak in a coal brazier. There are records of bribery. Coins slid under the door for mercy in the form of warmth, but in your case, no coin jingles in your pouch. You have only your breath, your straw, and the rat that's probably warmer than you. Your mind wanders again, as minds do in near sleep. You picture an open hearth upstairs, flames painting the stone orange, servants bustling with wooden buckets of water, iron fire tongs clinking. You picture nobles snoring on feather mattresses while embroidered curtains keep out the draft. You sigh at the injustice, survival down. Here is not about comfort. It is about endurance, a nightly contest between body heat and the castle's appetite for cold. And with that thought, you curl deeper, eyelids drooping despite the chill. Maybe you'll sleep, maybe not. Either way, the stones will keep whispering frost around you, and you, tonight's unlucky historian inmate, are simply part of the dungeon's endless winter. You ease yourself lower into the straw, which answers with a sigh like a tired cat that never liked you in the first place. The first sensation is damp, the second is prickly, and the third is a tiny marching band of itches starting along your calves. You breathe through it, slow and steady, then shift your weight so the worst of the moisture isn't directly under your hip. Your fingers sift a handful of stalks, stiff, hollow, broken lengths. Straw, not hay. You remind yourself, because yes, you are that kind of person, that straw is the dry leftover stem after grain is harvested. While hay is fodder for animals, straw is bedding, hay is dinner. Tonight, you're lying on a field's memory. It creaks when you move, a papery chorus that never quite settles, and you can't help smiling at the idea that every noise is a tiny alarm for fleas. Joke 1. Somewhere a flea foreman is shouting, "Positions, everyone! He rolled over!" You turn your head and let your cheek rest on the bundle. There's a faint sweetness in the smell, a ghost of summer sun trapped in the stalks, but it's laced with cellar damp and something lived in. You pluck out a black seed husk and a sliver of rush that doesn't belong here, wondering if the bundle was repurposed from the great hall's floor where rushes and herbs were often strewn to keep things fresh. That's your mainstream historical fact for the night. In many medieval spaces, floors were covered with rushes or straw, and occasionally sprinkled with fragrant herbs like lavender, meadowsweet, and pennyroyal to improve the smell and, people hoped, deter pests. You picture the hall above its greenish carpet of plant matter changing season by season, then glance at your own sorry mattress. Downstairs gets the hand-me-downs after the pageantry has faded. You worm a hand under the bedding, trying to find a dry pocket. Your fingertips meet a knot of string, the mattress's crude tie, and then, yes, a wriggle. You sit very still. Something tiny navigates your wrist as if it owns the place. Lice? Fleas? You choose flea because it's easier to flick, your kingdom for a comb. You exhale long and slow to keep the ASMR calm in your voice, then perform the ancient ritual of pretend you didn't feel that. Historians still argue whether prison straw was changed weekly, seasonally, or almost never. Surviving household ordinances for genteel spaces recommend relatively frequent floor rush replacements, but prisons were nobody's priority. You suspect your palate gets refreshed whenever a guard remembers that water exists. A draught strokes your ankles like a cat made of January. To trap what heat you can, you rake the straw toward your shins, building a low berm, then tuck loose stalks around your sides. The trick is simple. Create dead air, pockets that your body can warm. You become your own thatch roof, sealed against the weather. Somewhere you heard a tip that prisoners stuffed straw into their tunics to add loft, and you try it, pushing handfuls inside the neckline, giggling quietly because you now resemble a scarecrow who lost a fight with gravity. Joke 2. If the guards walk in, you'll claim to be a prototype for medieval puffer jackets. Your eyes adjust to the darkness. The torch in the corridor has withdrawn to a coal glow, but a pearly shard of moonlight sneaks through the arrow slit high on the wall and lands on your bedding, silvering the tips of the stalks. Shadows from the bars draw ladder rungs across the floor, and you half pretend you could climb them into sleep. You shift again and the straw sings back, a dry grasshopper rustle that actually soothes you a little. The straw's music is an accidental lullaby, the white noise of the poor. In a gentler world, someone would bring a warmed brick wrapped in cloth, a common medieval bedtime comfort upstairs. Down here, your brick is just a brick, and it is very much not warmed. You pinch a stalk and roll it between thumb and forefinger, thinking about the people who gathered it. Harvesters bent under August sun, scythes swishing, sheaves tied with twisted straw ropes. Some of that labor ends beneath you now, transformed into a mattress that can't decide if it wants to cradle or stab you. You find a feather, just the tip, grey, and grin at the audacity of it. Some long-dead chicken has contributed to this bed. That's tonight's quirky tidbit. There were folk remedies insisting that tucking certain feathers, like from a dove, into bedding could ward off nightmares. Others swore by stuffing parsley or rue under the pillow to keep lice away. You consider crumbling imaginary parsley on your palate. If the placebo warms you, it counts. Your mind drifts to the upstairs rooms where bed curtains trap warmth. Many medieval beds weren't just mattresses, they were microclimates. Boards, ropes, straw ticks, feather beds, woolen blankets, fur coverlets, then the heavy curtains drawn around. A little weatherproof tent of sleep. You picture the lattice of bed ropes. The phrase sleep tight may or may not refer to tightening those ropes, and historians still argue wet tours. That's a real etymology or a pleasing myth. Either way, you tug your imaginary ropes tight and let the straw underneath behave as your sagging support. When it pokes your ribs, you scoot an inch and make peace with being a hedgehog's pillow. From the corridor comes the clink of an iron ladle and the short laugh of a guard. You time your breathing to the sound like waves you can't see, letting the rhythm soften the edges of your heartbeat. You remember that earlier rat, your neighbour, and listen for it. Sure enough, a delicate rustle in the far corner suggests he's back to check your crumbs. The idea comes uninvited. If you stay very still, your body heat will warm this little cave of straw just enough. You commit to stillness. The first minute is easy. The second is itchy. By the third, you swear you hear fleas negotiating rent. Joke 3. You whisper, first month's free, but no parties. Then don't move because it hurts less not to. Your toes curl and uncurl inside your shoes. You debate taking them off to dry the leather, but decide against it. Waking to frozen boots would be its own comic tragedy. You do tug a loose stocking higher, and in doing so discover how the straw can be braided by feel. 3 stalks, over under, into a little cord. You make a short plait, then another, then tuck them along your wrists like bracelets. The motion is mindless, rhythmic, oddly calming, a quiet occupation against panic. Maybe someone else did this before. You imagine a line of tiny straw braids tucked into the cracks, a hidden rosary of previous nights. That chill along your spine pulses again, and you remember that damp is the real enemy. Cold you could fight with furs, damp crawls inside your bones and camps there. Some castles had drains in the dungeon floors, which helped when the cell flooded, but also guaranteed a permanent draft. Historians still argue whether particular dungeons were ever below the waterline on purpose as punishment, or simply ended up that way because medieval building projects were less concerned with what future podcasters would think. You press your palm flat to the stones and feel the slow breath of the earth, cold in, colder out. You focus on small comforts. A sliver of straw catches on your tongue of thought. Could you warm your breath beneath the bedding like a breathing tent? You lift the edge, exhale long, then nestle your face into the trapped warmth. It isn't much, but it's yours. You do it again and again, until the air under the straw is slightly less like January and slightly more like late October. You pretend there's a faint scent of lavender from some hall rush remnant. You let that pretend lavender be true enough. Sleep approaches sideways. You can feel it like a cat that will only sit on your lap if you don't look at it. To help it along, you count the prickles on your forearm as if they're stars. You listen to distant water as if it's a winter brook. You picture a hearth and the glowing snores of logs. A yawn caves your face, slow and heavy. You allow your jaw to hang slightly, a trick you learned somewhere between modern sleep podcasts and medieval common sense. Relax what you can, and the rest might follow. Before your thoughts scatter, you let one more practical notion root. If this straw were fresh, it would insulate better. If it were stuffed into a tick, a fabric casing, it wouldn't poke so much. If you had a cloak to drape, the straw would be half of a 2-part sissens. The mattress and the blanket meeting in the middle where your warmth lives. You don't have those things, not tonight. But you have a plan for your body. Curl, still, breathe warm, ignore the orchestra of microscopic roommates, and let the straw's music turn into sleep's static. A drop of water taps your forehead and you don't even flinch. You pretend it's a blessing, ridiculous as that sounds. The stone above, the straw below, your breath between, the simplest sandwich of survival. You close your eyes and let the shadows do their slow ballet on your lids. If upstairs is a concert of clattering plates and hearth crackles, downstairs is a lullaby of straw and stone. And while historians still argue whether prisoners truly slept much in conditions like these, you decide to be the counterexample, the marginal note in the manuscript, the footnote that says, somehow, yes. You wake not because you've truly slept, but because your ankle tingles with a sharp bite that's not from straw. You shift and hear the distinct clink of iron on stone. Shackles. The rings around your ankles are little more than rough iron cuffs. Their insides unpolished, edges chafing. They connect by a short length of chain that forces your gait into a shuffle. You drag it across the floor, and the sound becomes part of your soundtrack, metal grinding, echoing with every movement. If straw was your bed, iron is your blanket, a cold one that refuses to let go. You tug gently, testing how much freedom the chain allows. Not much, maybe 3 steps in either direction. Enough to lie down, enough to stand, but not enough to pace out your anxiety. You remember how medieval iron was forged. Bellows stoking charcoal, smiths hammering bars into shape on anvils, sparks flying. You picture some blacksmith sweating by his forge years ago, making shackles like yours. Did he feel pity for the future wearer? Or was it just another commission? Iron cuffs like horseshoes, ordered by the dozen. Historians still argue whether dungeon chains were always bespoke or if castles recycled them like kitchen pots. Either way, yours fit snug enough to feel personal. The cuff's surface is rimed with frost. You can see where condensation froze overnight, delicate white lacework etched into black metal. The cruel thing is that the iron seems to harvest the chill from the air and deliver it straight into your skin. It's science before science. Metal conducts heat away, meaning your body warmth seeps into the cuff and is lost. You press the flat of your hand against the cuff as if friction will help, but all you get is the sour tang of rust. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've invented medieval cold therapy. Spa treatment by torture device. You wiggle your toes inside your boots, the only body part. With a shred of autonomy, your ankles complain, skin-rubbed raw, little ridges forming where flesh presses into metal. You wonder if medieval jailers ever wrapped cloth between skin and iron. Sometimes they did, scraps of linen for nobles or bribes exchanged for padding. But, for commoners, bare flesh, cold iron. Records of complaints from prisoners mention sores, infections, even bones warped by long months of confinement. Archaeologists examining skeletons sometimes find ridges on leg bones suggesting repeated pressure, living echoes of shackles. That's your mainstream fact tonight. Bones themselves can tell tales of chains. You lower your legs and stretch them out, the chain taut between cuffs. The links lie flat against the straw like coiled snakes. In dim light, you count them. 12, maybe 13, each the width of your thumb. Each forged individually, each hammered shut by some long-gone smith. You imagine him muttering about the order size, just another day at the office. And here you are, centuries later, starring in his afterlife punchline. You shift again and think about symbolism. Chains weren't only about restraint, they were about humiliation. In courtly literature, chains could symbolize devotion or servitude, sometimes even romance. Knights described being chained to a lady's favour, a metaphor that must have rung bitterly ironic to anyone actually sitting in an iron collar. Joke 2. Ah yes, love is like a chain, except mine smells of mildew and infection. A drop of water strikes your cuff with a plink. The sound rings sharper than on stone, resonating through the iron like a tiny bell. You follow the vibration up your bones, through your shin, into your knee. Every movement is echoed by this iron symphony. Guards passing outside must hear it too. The music of prisoners, an orchestra no one wanted tickets to. You crouch and test the manacle's lock with your fingernails. The keyhole is primitive, a vertical slit. Medieval locks weren't subtle, but they didn't have to be. The cuff was strong enough to deter casual escape, and besides, who would supply you with a key? There are stories, quirky tidbits, of prisoners fashioning makeshift picks from chicken bones or bribing guards to accidentally leave a key nearby. Sometimes escapes succeeded, sometimes they didn't, ending with extra chains for everyone. You smile at the idea of using a straw stalk as a skeleton key. Joke 3. If Netflix existed in the Middle Ages, lockpicking with vegetables would have been trending. The cuffs are heavy, a constant awareness. Medieval accounts describe prisoners dragged in chains even during interrogations, clattering into halls like ghostly percussionists. Nobles sometimes wore lighter symbolic chains, polished, even gilded, meant to show imprisonment without the full misery. You, of course, wear the real thing. Utilitarian, ugly, effective. You rub your ankle absent-mindedly, feeling the welt beneath. The cold makes healing impossible. Any cut or rub festers. You recall that wounds in damp dungeons often bred infections. Gangrene was a common end. Did they have salves? Sure, honey, vinegar, herbs like sage or thyme, but would jailers spare them for you? Historians still argue whether basic care was provided or whether prisoners were simply left to rot. The silence in your cell tonight leans toward the latter. A faint scratching interrupts your thoughts. You glance down and realize frost has formed tiny crystals around the rivet hole of the shackle. It sparkles like jewelry, which feels like cosmic irony. Your ankles bedazzled by misery. For a moment you laugh softly, because what else is there to do? You're wearing the worst ankle bracelet trend in history, and it's too tight to remove. You shuffle sideways, chains scraping. The sound draws the rat from earlier. He scurries near, curious about the clatter. You imagine him as a fellow prisoner, tail shackled invisibly, running circles in the same cell. At least he can squeeze through cracks and explore. You, by contrast, are stuck within a 12-link radius. Your thoughts wander to tales of saints imprisoned. Some hagiographies describe holy men enduring shackles so piously that the iron itself grew weary and snapped. Others speak of chains preserved as relics, links displayed in churches kissed by pilgrims for blessings. The irony is thick. Iron that once tortured becomes holy. You lift your cuff and study it in moonlight, wondering if in centuries some relic hunter will venerate this very ring. You lie back, chains pooling around your ankles like a nest of snakes. The weight pins you down, not heavy enough to crush, but ever present. You think of how chains define posture, your body curled, legs never stretched fully. Sleep becomes compromise, the least uncomfortable position within your radius. Still, a grim comfort emerges. Chains mean you matter enough to restrain. A forgotten prisoner, harmless or irrelevant, might be left loose in his cell. Your captors think you capable of flight or mischief or rebellion. In a twisted way, the iron is a backhanded compliment. You're dangerous enough to deserve discomfort. You flex your toes again, blood moving sluggishly. You imagine the smith's hammer echoing, the guard's key turning, the endless procession of feet shackled before yours. The sound of chains is a lineage, a tradition older than memory, and tonight you are just another note in that endless song. You keep still for a long moment, ankles throbbing against the cuffs, until your eyes catch a flicker not your own. There, beyond the bars, in the corridor, a faint dance of orange and gold, firelight. It isn't here for you, but you feel it anyway, like a warm mirage promising relief. The torch sits in its sconce on the wall just out of reach, its flame swaying in the draught, throwing jittering shadows across the stones. You watch it like a starving man studies bread. The irony is cruel. The very element that could thaw your bones is paraded in front of you, untouchable. You shuffle closer, chain dragging like an exasperated sigh. The straw beneath you rustles. You stretch a hand through the bars. For a breath, you imagine your fingers catching that heat, drawing it into your palm like stolen treasure. But the gap is too wide. the distance too far. The air between you and the torch feels like a wall of glass, thin, transparent but impassable. You withdraw, hand trembling with more than cold. Joke 1. It's like medieval window shopping. You can look at the goods, but your coin purse is permanently empty. Your gaze fixes on the flame again. Fire, in the medieval mind, was never neutral. It was comfort and terror, heaven and hell, warmth and punishment. Upstairs, fires blazed in great hearths, tended by pages with iron tongs and bellows. They roasted meat, heated chambers, gathered families. Down here, fire becomes spectacle, a cruel reminder of what you lack. You can almost smell the resin of the torch's pinewood handle, the faint animal fat fueling its burn. Fire travels through your senses without ever touching your skin. You press your forehead against the cold bar. The metal chills, but your eyes refuse to leave the flame. It flickers higher, then shrinks, shadows sliding like restless phantoms along the corridor. You imagine following those shadows, slipping beyond. Your cell, padding toward a fireplace roaring with red logs. Some dungeons, in fact, had braziers placed within, usually for higher-ranked prisoners. Archaeologists have found iron stands scorched black in certain castle cells. But not here, not for you. Historians still argue whether most prisoners froze in deliberate neglect or whether resources simply didn't stretch to spare wood for the condemned. Either way, the result is identical. The flame belongs to someone else. You lean back, close your eyes and let memory do the warming. You recall standing at a village hearth years ago, heat soaking your knees while sparks spat and hissed. You remember the way stone chimneys breathed like giants, exhaling smoke into the night. That's your mainstream historical fact here. Chimneys only became common in late medieval Europe, transforming how heat circulated through castles. Before then, smoke lingered in rafters, forcing inhabitants to live half-choked but still warm. You chuckle bitterly. Smoke or frost, pick your poison. The torch wavers. A guard approaches, his boots crunching faintly. He stops near the flame, adjusts it with practiced ease, then turns away. For a heartbeat, warmth rolls down the corridor, a ghostly draft reaching your cheek. You close your eyes to savor it, as though a kiss from the fire itself. Joke 2, it's like ordering delivery food, and the driver just walks past your house, chewing your fries. You open your eyes again and notice something else. The fire reveals details of your prison that moonlight hid. Cracks in mortar, dark streaks of soot above the torch's sconce, a spider web glittering faintly with dew. You study these details greedily, as if cataloguing a museum exhibit of your misery. The way fire reshapes darkness is its own magic. To medieval eyes, fire was alive, a creature that fed on wood, breathed air, and died when starved. Sitting in your cell, you almost believe it, like you're watching some golden beast pacing in its cage. The flame steadies, and you notice the shadows it casts of your chains. They stretch across the straw like black vines, roots growing outward from your ankles. You follow them with your gaze until they fade into the wall. It feels metaphorical, though you laugh softly at yourself for being dramatic in a cell. But what else do you have? When you're this cold, philosophy is as much insulation as rags. Another drop of water falls nearby. The light catches it mid-air, turning it into a bead of molten gold before it smacks into stone. For a moment, you see alchemy everywhere. Frost sparkling like gems, rust gleaming like copper, straw glowing amber under fire's brush. That's your quirky tidbit tonight. Medieval alchemists genuinely believed that fire could transmute elements, turning base metals to gold. Sitting here, you know better. All it turns is your envy into longing. You edge closer again, stretching until your shoulders ache. The chain tightens, the cuffs bite, but you keep your hand out as if to grasp light itself. The torch hisses faintly, a reminder that fire also devours. You wonder if touching it would even be worth it. Warmth first, then blister. A prisoner's version of a bargain. You smirk at the absurdity and whisper aloud, "Better to blister than to freeze." Joke 3. Congratulations, you've just pitched the W's. Forced medieval skincare routine. Torch kiss glow. Coming soon to a dungeon near you. You let your arm fall back, exhausted. The flame dances on, unbothered by your yearning. Its warmth drifts to the guards, to the corridor, but never to you. And yet, oddly enough, its mere presence eases you. You can see it. You can imagine it. Sometimes imagining warmth fools the body just enough. The human mind is half stove, half trickster. You lie back, chains pooling, straw scratching, and close your eyes. Behind your lids, the flame burns brighter than ever, filling the darkness with an inner glow. You breathe deep, pretending smoke curls around you, pretending sparks leap like fireflies. You let the illusion cradle you, because tonight, illusion is the only blanket the dungeon offers. You wake again with your cheek pressed against the straw, your ankles stiff from the shackles, and your eyes drawn once more to the ragged scraps you call clothing. The torchlight outside has burned lower, but enough glow sneaks into the cell to show you the state of your wardrobe. What you're wearing isn't really clothing. It's an assortment of layers that once belonged to better garments, now reduced to threads and holes. A tunic frayed at the cuffs, hose patched with different colours, a scrap of woolen cloth you've tried to knot around your shoulders like a cloak. It doesn't look like much, but to you it's the difference between misery and absolute ruin. You tug at the edge of your tunic, the fabric stiff from sweat and damp. Indigo dye, once bright, has faded into a murky grey blue, and the russet patch across your thigh is stitched so clumsily it puckers like a scar. Prison fashion, you think. Make do with what you've stolen, begged, or been given. Joke 1. You'd be laughed off any medieval runway, unless the show's theme was how to survive in style when everyone hates you. Still, you adjust the cloak scrap around your shoulders, pulling it tighter. Wool is a blessing, even in tatters. You remember that wool was the backbone of medieval Europe's economy. Fleeces spun into cloth, dyed, exported across the Channel. Entire fortunes rose on sheep's backs. Nobles wrapped themselves in long wool cloaks, dyed deep scarlet or teal, trimmed with fur. You get the leftovers, the ends of bolts that nobody else wanted. But at least wool keeps some heat when wet, which is more than linen can say. That's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval prisoners, when lucky, received cast-off garments of wool because even scraps provided insulation. You lift the hem of your tunic to inspect a patch near the knee. Someone stitched it with bone needle and thick thread. The work crud. But serviceable. You trace the crosshatches with your finger, imagining the inmate who made them. Maybe he bartered bread for thread. Maybe he begged a guard's pity. Needlework in a cell becomes more than craft, it's survival. Historians still argue whether sewing kits were ever officially provided to prisoners or whether scraps of bone and stolen thread made up the tools of necessity. The neatness of this repair tells you someone cared enough to keep themselves covered. You shift and look down at your shoes. Leather, cracked and splitting at the seams. The toes curl upward from damp, and the soles flap with each step. Shoes are tricky in the dungeon. If you take them off, they stiffen with frost and become impossible to wear again. If you keep them on, your feet stay wet, risking sores. Either way, your toes never forgive you. You tap one shoe against the flagstone, the hollow sound echoing, and you laugh softly at the thought that these shoes once walked a freer path, fields, markets, maybe even a festival. Now they're just leather prisons inside a stone prison. You rub your arms, the scrap cloak scratchy against your skin. Scratchiness is good, though. It means the fibers are dense. You imagine how peasants in villages layered rags and cloaks in winter, sometimes sleeping in every piece of clothing they owned. Records from medieval manorial rolls mention winter allowances of cloth for servants, so many yards of russet wool for each man, perhaps saffron-dyed hose for the steward. Nobles had wardrobes with dozens of gowns. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit except you do, quietly, into the straw. Still, there's room for humour. Joke 2. If there had been a medieval version of thrift stores, dungeons would have been their clearance rack. Today only, pre-chilled tunics, slightly gnawed, fleas included at no extra charge. You wrap the cloak tighter, pulling it over your head until you're cocooned. The smell of the cloth is pungent, sweat, mildew, perhaps the faint ghost of lanolin from sheep. It's rough against your cheek, but the cave it creates traps your breath. You exhale long, filling the space with warmth. For a moment it works. Your face grows hot, your skin prickles, your eyelashes dampen with condensation. You realize this is your tent, your fortress. Prisoners must have done this often, draping whatever cloth they had into makeshift microclimates. You let your mind wander further. Cloaks in medieval life weren't just warmth. They were identity. Colours mattered. Russet marked peasants, bright indigo or saffron marked the wealthy. Green sometimes symbolised youth, black sobriety or mourning. You think of yourself wrapped in grey, a colour of obscurity. No one marks you noble or steward. You're invisible, the cloak making you part of the stone itself. That anonymity becomes its own shield. Your hand finds the edge of a sleeve, someone else's sleeve, stitched into your tunic as reinforcement. The colour is teal, faded but still vibrant compared to your russet patch. You wonder who wore it before. A merchant, a guard, a fellow prisoner who didn't make it through the last winter. Every scrap has a history, and now you wear their ghosts. That's your quirky tidbit. In times of scarcity, clothing was endlessly recycled, patched, even cut into strips for bandages, then returned to patchwork garments again. Nothing wasted, everything reused. Even in prisons, fashion was circular. The torch outside sputters, flaring once, and in its glow you glimpse another prison. Palmed through the bars of the opposite cell. He too is huddled in rags, cloak drawn like a cocoon. For a moment you share a look, mutual recognition. His cloak is patched with saffron cloth, the colour bright even in dim light. You smirk, whispering to yourself that he's clearly the more stylish inmate. Joke 3. If the guards held a fashion show, you'd both get medals for most likely to freeze but make it look chic. You tug your hood lower, face shadowed. The cloak scratches but comforts. The cuffs at your ankles dig, but the wool distracts. The straw rustles beneath, but you barely notice. All you care about is the cocoon you've made, a fortress of scraps and patches. It won't last long. Eventually damp will seep, fleas will march, straw will stab. But for this moment it feels like defiance, like you've taken the scraps they gave you and turned them into a shield. You close your eyes and let the cloak's scratch turn into lullaby. You picture nobles upstairs in fur-lined gowns, sipping hot, spiced wine. You don't envy them tonight. Instead, you find a strange pride in your cocoon, your patchwork fortress. They may have fur and fire, but you have resilience, stitched from scraps and warmed by stubbornness. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to survive one more night. You shift your weight again, straw creaking beneath you, when a thought occurs. Maybe the floor itself has something to offer. At first, the idea sounds ridiculous. Stone is the very definition of cold. But then you remember the warmth you felt earlier when your back pressed against the wall. Was it real or just a trick of exhaustion? You stretch out flat, cheek against the flagstone, and pay attention. It's there, faint but undeniable, a residue of warmth stored from the day. The castle above may block sunlight, but stones are cunning. They hoard heat in hidden veins, then release it like whispers long after the sun is gone. You press your palm to the ground and swear the slab breathes faintly back into your skin. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've just discovered medieval underfloor heating, powered entirely by wishful thinking. Still, it's worth exploring. You crawl slowly across your limited range, shackles scraping, testing each stone like a man tasting bread for mold. Some are bitterly cold, others neutral, but here and there you find patches slightly warmer. Maybe the floor beneath connects to kitchens or storerooms above, absorbing their fires. Maybe it's just your body tricking you again. Historians still argue whether lower castle levels sometimes benefited from accidental heating through shared walls and chimneys, or whether dungeons were cut so far into the earth that warmth never reached them. You, lying here, vote for accidental mercy. You spread out as wide as the chain allows, belly to the stone, limbs starfish flat. The idea is simple. Maximize surface contact, steal every crumb of heat. Your cheek rests against the slab, your breath fogging across it, and you notice that the stone keeps your breath longer than straw ever could. You trace a crack in the flagstone, following its jagged path, imagining that warmth travels along it like blood through veins. A drop of water slides down from the ceiling and lands near your nose. It spreads in a dark circle, then vanishes into the crack. You follow it with your eyes, convinced the stone just drank. That's your quirky tidbit. Medieval masons often believed stone had life, that it could sweat or breathe. Chronicles mention walls weeping in damp seasons, a poetic description you now fully understand. These walls aren't just backdrops, they're living roommates, and tonight they exhale frost. You curl tighter, trying to press your spine into the floor's faint warmth. It doesn't last. Your body leaches it faster than the stone can give. You imagine yourself as a thief caught mid-crime, stealing heat from a miser who clutches every coin. But even thieves take what they can. Joke 2. You whisper, "Thanks for the loan. I promise I'll pay back in summer." Your thoughts wander to floors elsewhere. In Roman villas, long before your castle, hypercaust systems pumped hot air beneath tiles, heating entire baths and halls. By the Middle Ages, that luxury was gone, but stories lingered. You grin faintly, imagining a prisoner lying flat in some half-ruined Roman bath, cursing the fact that the hypercaust was cold centuries too early. The contrast is brutal. Once people bathed in warmth like gods, now you huddle on stone like forgotten livestock. You roll to your side, curling, and notice how your body heat slowly warms the patch beneath you. It's not much, but it's something. You realize survival here is about layering illusions, pretending the straw is a mattress, pretending rags are cloaks, pretending stone is a bed warmer. You become half body, half imagination. The mind supplies what the cell lacks. Historians still argue whether most prisoners survived by physical endurance or mental resilience. The truth is both. You're proof that imagination is insulation. Another rat scurries past, claws scratching faintly across the flagstones. You envy its ease. Tiny feet, tiny body, less heat to lose. You smirk, thinking maybe the rat knows more about floor warmth than you do. You picture him with a tiny blueprint, marking warm spots across the dungeon, smugly claiming them before you arrive. Joke 3. If rats had Yelp, your slab would get 4 stars. Good warmth, ambiance questionable, service non-existent. You adjust again, trying different positions. On your back, you spread arms wide, staring at the ceiling, chains resting cold against thighs. On your stomach, you fold arms beneath your chest, cheek pressed hard. Sideways you curl like a shrimp, knees tucked, spine pressed into slab. Each posture brings a new relationship with the stone. Some patches cool too fast, others hold. The trick is to keep moving, always chasing warmth like a cat finding sunbeams. Your hand finds a worn dip in the floor, a shallow depression smoothed by centuries, perhaps feet pacing, perhaps shackles dragging. You fit your palm into it and realize it cradles heat slightly longer, like a natural bowl. You shift so your hip rests there, a small victory. You imagine prisoners long before you finding the same spot, sighing the same relief. That's your mainstream fact. Many dungeons still show wear marks in stone, grooves from chai, and hollows from repeated sitting. The stones themselves remember. You close your eyes, tracing that thought. The floor is memory, not just matter. It remembers storms overhead, boots on battlements, fires in kitchens, and the restless tossing of hundreds who lay where you lay. You're just another dream pressed into its archive. That realization comforts you, oddly. You're not alone. The stone has carried countless before you. Your breathing slows. You imagine you're sinking into the slab, merging with it, trading body heat for permanence. For a moment, you don't feel cold. You feel part of something older, heavier, enduring. You think of alchemists again. If stone breathes, maybe it dreams, and maybe tonight you've been invited into its dream. You drift on that thought, letting the faint warmth cradle you until your muscles slacken. You stir awake, stiff from the stone's embrace, and realize that your body has done the cruelest thing. It has grown colder in sleep. Shivers ripple through you like waves in a frozen pond, each spasm tugging at the shackles. You curl tighter, clutching your knees when a sound draws your attention. Breathing, not your own but someone else's, steady and close. You turn your head and see another prisoner in the shadows, pressed against the opposite wall of the cell. He has been silent all night, a hunched silhouette, but now you catch the rhythm of his exhale, vapor drifting like a small cloud. You don't know his name, nor he yours, but suddenly you understand. Survival here is a group project. If straw and stone fail you, maybe shared flesh will succeed. You shift closer, chain clanking, hesitant. He glances at you but doesn't protest. In dungeons, pride freezes faster than water. You lower yourself beside him, tentative at first, then leaning until your shoulders touch. Heat blossoms instantly, startling, comforting. His breath tickles your cheek and you realize just how much warmth a single body carries. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've invented the original 2-player heating system. No coins required. The air between you grows less sharp, more bearable. You both adjust, turning slightly until your backs meet. The exchange is simple. You give heat, you take heat, the balance keeping both alive. Historians record such practices not only among prisoners but among soldiers and peasants too. In bitter winters, men slept back to back in barns or barracks, sometimes in groups of 3 or more, layering themselves like logs in a fire. That's your mainstream fact. Human beings have always been each other's furnaces. You close your eyes, listening to his breaths. They come slow, controlled. Perhaps he's asleep, or perhaps, like you, he's only pretending to escape the night. You let your own breaths match his, sinking like 2 flutes in a duet. The rhythm soothes, almost hypnotizes. For a moment you forget the chains, the straw, the stone. There is only warmth borrowed and warmth returned. Yet it's not all comfort. Bodies bring their own hazards. The man shifts and you smell his rags, mildew, sweat, something sour. You remind yourself, warmth doesn't ask questions. You can endure a little stench for a reprieve from frost. You also feel the hard outline of his chain press against your side, a cruel reminder that misery doesn't soften just because you share it. Still, you press closer, determined. A memory flickers, stories of shipwrecked sailors huddling together on rafts, surviving nights only by pressing chest to chest. Accounts exist of medieval pilgrims too, who slept side by side in crowded inns, strangers becoming bedfellows for necessity. Historians still argue whether medieval society truly feared intimacy in such moments, or whether survival always excused closeness. You here don't care what the argument is. Your body cares only that it isn't alone. The man exhales louder, almost a sigh, and you imagine he too has given up pretense. Maybe this is what prisoners do: huddle silently, wordless contracts binding them. You consider speaking but decide against it. Words risk breaking the fragile peace. Instead, you let your shoulder press firmer, as if language has shifted into body weight. A rustle joins you. Another prisoner in the cell across the corridor shifts closer to the bars. He must have seen the two of you and decided to copy the tactic. Soon you hear the faint rhythm of his breath sinking with someone unseen beside him. A chain reaction of warmth, each inmate discovering the obvious truth. You can't freeze as quickly if you refuse to freeze alone. You chuckle quietly. Joke 2. If anyone upstairs knew how much cuddling was happening in their dungeons, they might have added it to the punishments list. Sentenced to 20 years hard labor and mandatory spooning. The warmth steadies you. For the first time all night you stop shivering. Your muscles unclench and your thoughts drift. You picture wolves in winter dens curling together for survival. You picture medieval peasants sleeping in cottages, children pressed between parents, goats in corners, chickens roosting overhead, all part of the same breathing furnace. Humans aren't unique in this. Animals do it too. You smile at the thought. Survival makes everything communal. You drift into half sleep, then wake again when the man beside you shifts. His elbow nudges your ribs. You flinch, then realize he's not pushing away. He's rearranging, making the fit better. The chain rattles as he stretches, then settles against you again. You imagine this is his way of saying, "We live another night, thanks to this." Your mind wanders. There's a story of prisoners during a siege who survived an entire winter by sleeping in shifts, 4 men pressed into one blanket, rotating to give each other relief. That's your quirky tidbit. Communal warmth wasn't just casual, it was often organized, almost ritual. Here, in your cell, you lack blankets or plans, but the instinct remains. The torch outside flickers, shadows sliding across both your faces. In that moment, you see his features, gaunt cheeks, a beard, rimed with frost, eyes half shut. He doesn't look at you, but his mouth curves into the faintest hint of a smile. You realize it isn't just heat you're sharing, it's humanity. A reminder that you're both still alive, still tethered to something beyond misery. You think about noble banquets above, where courtiers sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing laughter and spilling wine. Here too you sit shoulder to shoulder, different banquet, same principle. Survival requires proximity, whether in silk or in rags. Historians still argue whether prisoners forged bonds or resented each other in such confinement. You suspect it was both. Tonight, you choose the bond. Joke 3 comes as you close your eyes. Congratulations, stranger. We've officially skipped the awkward small talk stage and gone straight to medieval hibernation buddies. You rest again, warmth steady, chains quieter. For a fleeting moment, the dungeon feels less like a tomb and more like a den. You're not alone in the frost anymore, and sometimes that alone is enough to tip survival toward morning. The warmth of another body lingers as dawn threatens somewhere far above, but your stomach betrays you before the light does. It growls with a hollow insistence, a sound louder in the silence of stone. Hunger and cold are old companions, and in the dungeon they always arrive together. You roll slightly, the straw rustling, and wonder if food will come today, or if the guards have forgotten again. Hours pass in fragments of shivering naps before you hear it, the scrape of boots, the rattle of a wooden ladle. A guard appears, shadowed by the flickering torch carrying a bucket. He sloshes its contents into a smaller vessel and slides it through the bars, a wooden bowl, steaming faintly. You scramble forward, chain clattering, and wrap your hands around it. The warmth stings at first, fingers thawing painfully. For a moment, you almost don't care what it is. It's hot, and that's miracle enough. You lift the bowl to your nose. The broth is thin, almost water, but laced with the ghost of vegetables and barley, maybe a bone boiled until it gave up every secret. Floating in it are specks of grease that shimmer in the dim light. You sip carefully, and the liquid scalds your lips before sliding down into your chest. It doesn't last long, but it ignites a fire within, a small furnace in your belly. Joke 1. Congratulations, you've just enjoyed the medieval equivalent of a 5-star hot chocolate minus the chocolate milk or stars. You gulp another mouthful, the warmth spreading. The broth is barely food, yet it changes everything. Calories turn into fuel, fuel into heat, heat into survival. That's your mainstream fact. Even meager rations could stave off hypothermia because digestion itself produces warmth. Prisoners often described soup or ale as the difference between shivering and sleeping. Beside the bowl lies a crust of bread, hard as wood. You dunk it into the broth, softening it until it crumbles, then swallow. It tastes sour, maybe rye or barley, but to you it's better than feasts upstairs. Hunger turns the ordinary into delicacy. You lick the inside of the bowl clean, not caring who touched it before. The guard laughs at your desperation before leaving. His torchlight recedes, but the warmth of the broth lingers. You hug the empty bowl against your chest as though it still radiates heat. And in some way, it does. Your imagination filling in what reality denies. Your thoughts wander to medieval diets. Nobles dined on roasted meats, spiced wines, and rich pastries. Peasants ate pottage, thick stews of grains and vegetables simmered slowly. Prisoners, at best, received the peasants' scraps diluted with water. Some accounts describe meals of mouldy bread, thin gruel, or nothing for days. Historians still argue whether dungeons had consistent rations or whether feeding prisoners was left to local whim. You, sipping phantom warmth from a memory bowl, lean toward the second answer. You set the bowl down and lick your lips. The broth has eased the worst edge of hunger and sparked a temporary glow inside. Digestion becomes your secret fireplace. You curl again, letting that faint heat spread. It doesn't last long, but for now it's a shield against the frost. Another prisoner coughs in the next cell, then slurps his own ration noisily. You imagine his broth too thin, his bread too hard, yet his sigh afterward is the same as yours. Food and warmth merge. What enters your stomach becomes a blanket, flimsy but real. You remember stories of ale in prisons. Beer, even weak, was often safer than water, and its alcohol provided fleeting warmth. Some records describe guards selling ale to prisoners at extortion prices, turning misery into profit. That's your quirky tidbit. There are tales of prisoners deliberately drinking to feel warm, only to collapse into deeper cold. You smile wryly, imagining yourself swaying in shackles after half a mug, convinced you're toasty while frost sneaks in. Your belly rumbles again, this time softer, as if thanking you. You stretch out, the warmth making your joints less brittle. Hunger still lingers, but the broth has bought you another hour of endurance. You whisper to yourself, half prayer, half sarcasm, "Blessed be the barley, for it keepeth me from turning into a human icicle." That's joke 2. You rest your cheek back on the straw, bowl beside you like a companion. The faint smell of broth lingers, almost comforting. You know it will sour soon, drawing rats. But for now, it's perfume of survival. You close your eyes and imagine feasts, platters of roasted goose, trenchers dripping with gravy, pies steaming. The visions warm you almost as much as the broth did. But reality intrudes. A drop of water falls onto your arm, startling you back. The cell remains cold, damp, unyielding. Yet the warmth inside your belly still holds. That tiny fire refuses to die quickly. You glance at the prisoner beside you. He too cradles his bowl, licking the last drops. For a moment your eyes meet and you share a silent acknowledgement. Food isn't just nourishment, it's a temporary escape, a reminder that you're still alive enough to swallow. Joke 3 comes as you pat your stomach lightly. Dinner for champions, if the championship is who can shiver loudest after eating half a turnip. You curl once more into your straw cocoon, letting digestion do its work. The broth, thin as it was, becomes a furnace stoked by barley ghosts. It may not last until morning, but for now, in this hour, you are warmer than you were yesterday, and in the dungeon that is victory enough. The warmth from the broth fades quickly, and as it ebbs, another sensation crawls into focus, the prickling itch of tiny legs. At first you ignore it, brushing your sleeve against your skin as though it's just straw. But then it comes again, sharper this time, moving up your wrist. You swat, and sure enough, a rat darts across your straw pile, bold as any noble at a feast. You sit up, heart thudding, and watch its slick body vanish into a corner. It doesn't stay gone for long. Another rat follows, nosing the wooden bowl you left beside you, licking invisible remnants of broth. Their eyes gleam faintly in the dimness, beady sparks reflecting torchlight. The scratching sound multiplies, claws on stone, tails whipping straw, teeth gnawing. The dungeon is alive with companions you never invited. You pull your cloak tighter and shift your feet, but you know the truth. They were here long before you, and they will be here long after. Joke 1. Congratulations, you're now paying rent to the real landlords of the dungeon, the Rats and Fleas Guild, always collecting on time. At first, disgust overpowers you. Their fur brushes against your ankles, their squeaks chatter in your ears. But slowly you realize something unexpected. Where rats gather, warmth follows. Their bodies radiate faint heat, a collective furnace of vermin. It's a grim calculation, comfort purchased at the price of revulsion. You shiver anyway, acknowledging the compromise. You scratch your scalp and wince at another nuisance, lice. They thrive in your cloak, nesting in seams and patches. You run a hand through your hair and catch one between your nails, flicking it away. The itch never stops, as if each louse has recruited 10 more comrades. Historians note lice were so common in medieval life that even kings scratched at court. Soldiers gave them nicknames, greybacks or shirt lice. You, here, just call thee Trouble. That's your mainstream fact. Parasites were universal, ignored only when they became unbearable. You scratch harder, then laugh bitterly. Joke 2. Forget royal crowns. The only coronation I've received is Flea King of cell number 3. The rats grow bolder. One climbs onto your straw mound, whiskers twitching as it searches for crumbs. You swat, but it dodges gracefully, circling back as if mocking you. You realize that fighting them is futile. Better to coexist, uneasy neighbors in the same freezing street. And perhaps, though you loathe to admit it, their presence brings a strange companionship. In the silence of stone, squeaks and scratches remind you you're not entirely alone. You remember a story once told. A prisoner in Paris claimed that rats shared his cell so faithfully they became his friends. He fed them crumbs, and in return they left him untouched in his sleep. Whether truth or fancy, you cling to it now. That's your quirky tidbit. Medieval folklore sometimes painted rats as omens of death, of plague, or occasionally of loyalty. Here, loyalty is measured in not chewing your toes. You curl tighter, wrapping straw around your feet, and glance again at the rat nibbling the bread crust you'd forgotten. Its tiny jaws work furiously, breaking the crust into crumbs. Watching it, you marvel at its persistence. The rat doesn't think of tomorrow, only the next bite. You envy that focus. You worry about frostbite, starvation, the endless night. The rat only eats. In a twisted way, you almost admire it. Still, unease lingers. Disease rides on these creatures, plague, typhus, filth, fever. You've heard the tales, whispered like curses. Entire villages emptied by blackened buboes, corpses stacked in pits. Historians still argue how much rats truly spread plague versus their fleas, but you don't need arguments. You just need to survive tonight without turning into a corpse yourself. One rat creeps too close, brushing your ankle. You flinch, then pause. The warmth is undeniable. Its tiny body radiates more heat than straw ever could. You sit still, letting it linger until it scampers off. You exhale, half disgusted, half grateful. Joke 3. And to think my mother warned me about bad roommates. She never mentioned the whiskered ones. You lie back, straw prickling, cloak scratching, and listen to the dungeon's new orchestra. Chains rattling, rats squeaking, lice scratching, your own stomach groaning. It's not music anyone would pay for, but it fills the silence. You realize survival here is measured in compromises. You wanted warmth, you got rats. You wanted comfort, you got fleas. Yet somehow it's enough to see another hour through. The torchlight dims, shadows thickening, and you feel another scuttle near your feet. You don't bother swatting this time. You close your eyes, pretending the rat is just another prisoner curled near you, lending warmth without words. The dungeon has its own strange community, human and vermin alike, and tonight you're part of it. You lie still, your cloak scratchy, straw prickling your cheek, rats rustling in corners. But now the weight of night presses heavier, and your body trembles from exhaustion. Cold gnaws at your bones in a way even broth and borrowed body heat can't mend. When the physical fails, you turn to the only warmth left, the warmth of belief. You clasp your hands, fingers stiff, nails rimed with dirt. You press your thumbs together until they ache and you murmur into the darkness. The words aren't polished. They tumble out like pebbles in a stream. Lord, keep me through this night. If not, at least keep me from knowing I'm gone. The sound of your own voice, low and quivering, startles you. But there's comfort in hearing it at all. It proves you're alive. Your breath fogs before your lips, curling upward like incense smoke. You imagine it climbing the dungeon wall, slipping through the arrow slit above, rising into the starless sky. For a moment you fancy it reaches someone. God, saint, angel, anyone who can trade warmth for prayer. Joke 1. If my breath makes it to heaven, I hope they've got better heating than down here. You think of the prisoners before you, kneeling in straw, whispering the same words. Some scratched crosses into the stone, others muttered charms. Archaeologists still find tiny carvings in dungeons, crude crucifixes, suns, even circles with spokes, symbols for luck. That's your mainstream fact. Prayer and superstition filled the silence of captivity, becoming blankets for the soul when cloaks failed the body. You rub your thumb over the wall, searching for marks. Sure enough, you find a groove, faint but deliberate, a cross etched by someone's desperate hand. The lines are uneven, scratched by nail or shard of stone, but they're there. You press your forehead to it, sharing in their faith, borrowing courage across centuries. The wall chills your ski, but the symbol warms your heart. Yet not every whisper belongs to saints. From the opposite cell, a prisoner mutters words you don't recognize, syllables heavy and strange, perhaps charms, perhaps curses. You remember tales of medieval prisoners weaving spells against cold, stuffing herbs into rags, muttering over knots tied in straw. Historians still argue whether such acts were belief or desperation, but to the freezing body, there's no difference. Both are hope in disguise. Your mind drifts to other customs. Some believed iron nails driven into cell doors could bind spirits, keeping evil out. Others hung amulets of bone or carved runes. Sailors prayed to saints against storms. Peasants lit candles against frost. You, chained in your dungeon, have no candles, no amulets. But you have breath, words, and the stubbornness to use them. That's your quirky tidbit. Charms and prayers were often indistinguishable, each one a whispered plea to anything listening. You murmur again, softer now, almost a lullaby. Protect me, warm me, keep the frost from my heart. Your voice blends with the drip of water, the scratch of rats, the rattle of chains. For a moment the dungeon becomes a chapel, an unholy, unclean but honest chapel. You imagine a candle before you, its flame steady. In your mind, its glow warms your hands, its wax drips slow tears onto stone. The vision comforts you so much that you feel your shoulders ease, your breath deepen. You almost believe there is light in the cell beyond the torch outside. Then the doubt creeps in. You wonder, does anyone listen? Did the cross on the wall save its carver, or did frost take him anyway? Historians still argue whether medieval faith gave real resilience or was simply the last refuge of despair. You decide the answer doesn't matter. Belief warms you now, and warmth, real or imagined, is survival. Your head droops, eyelids heavy. Words blur into murmurs, murmurs into silence. The prayer doesn't stop. It flows even when you drift. Your lips move without thought, like a wheel that keeps spinning. You dream of saints in cloaks, of angels with lanterns, of hearths waiting beyond the bars. Joke too comes in your dream. If an angel does come down here, I hope he brings a blanket and not just a harp. You wake again to silence, your body stiff but still alive. The cross on the wall feels less like stone and more like a companion. You smile faintly, despite cracked lips. Prayer hasn't given you fire or bread, but it has given you time, and sometimes that's all you need. From the corner, a rat squeaks as though agreeing. You sigh, whispering one last line, "Watch over me, even if it's just until dawn." And with that, you let faith, superstition, and exhaustion wrap around you like a cloak invisible to the guards. Joke 3, whispered as you close your eyes. Who knew bedtime prayers doubled as medieval sleeping bags? The night is no warmer, but your heart is steadier, and sometimes that makes the cold almost bearable. The prayer fades from your lips and silence returns, but not for long. A sound trickles down the corridor, boots on stone, laughter low and careless. You stiffen, pressing closer to the wall, knowing it's not food this time. The guards are coming, and when guards arrive at midnight, it's rarely mercy they carry. They stop outside your cell, torchlight spilling like molten gold across the straw. One of them peers in, grinning through broken teeth. "Cold in there?" he asks, his voice dripping with mockery. You don't answer. Silence feels safer. But the other guard nudges him, chuckling. "Bet he's shaking like a dog in the snow. Think he'll last till morning?" Their laughter bounces off the walls, a chorus colder than the air itself. You keep still, but the sound of a bucket sloshing sets your stomach sinking. They lift it high, tipping it toward the bars. A wave of icy water splashes through, soaking your straw, drenching your cloak. You gasp as the cold bites deeper than any winter draft, a knife straight through skin to bone. The guards roar with laughter, satisfied at your misery. Joke 1. Apparently, ice bucket challenges were a medieval invention, minus the charity. You huddle in your corner, clutching your knees, teeth chattering uncontrollably now. The water seeps into your boots, your hose, your tunic, making every patch of cloth a new instrument of torture. Wet wool loses its dignity. It clings, heavy and clammy. The straw beneath turns into a swamp, mud mixed with rot. You shift, but there's no dry place left. The guards linger, watching you squirm. They toss a crust of bread into the puddle and laugh as a rat scrambles to retrieve it, your dinner reduced to vermin sport. "Keeps 'em strong," one says, as though this cruelty is care. Historians still argue whether such acts were sadistic games or crude methods of testing endurance. Some chronicles describe a jailers deliberately soaking prisoners, curious to see who survived. Others suggest it was nothing more than drunken cruelty. Tonight, you feel like both answers are true. The bucket clangs empty and the guards shuffle off, their laughter fading. Torchlight recedes, leaving you in a darker dark, drenched and shivering. You squeeze your cloak tighter, but it offers nothing now. Every breath fogs white, rising like smoke from a fire that's going out. You huddle smaller, trying to trap even the faintest heat inside your ribs. Your mind drifts, half numb, but a thought cuts through. Experiments. You've heard whispers that some rulers used prisons for cruel tests, measuring how long a man could last without food, warmth, or sleep. There are accounts of cells intentionally flooded to waist height, prisoners left standing until their legs failed. That's your mainstream fact. Cruelty wasn't always random. Sometimes it masqueraded as curiosity. You glance at your puddled straw and wonder if you're just another line in some unspoken experiment. Your fingers grow stiff, nails purple. You rub them together, but the friction fails. You try blowing on them, your breath a useless puff of mist. Desperation drives you to tuck your hands under your armpits, pressing tight, curling smaller. You feel like an egg trying to hatch, hoping heat will come from nowhere. Then you remember tales of warmth created by movement. Soldiers marched in place, clapping arms across their chests. Peasants stamped feet in barns to keep blood flowing. You try it, rising awkwardly, shackles clanking, stomping your boots in shallow puddles. The sound echoes, ridiculous but rhythmic. You beat your arms against your sides, a prisoner's dance. Joke 2. Congratulations, you've just invented Dungeon Zumba. Burn calories, stay alive, impress the rats. The exercise works for a moment. Your heart pumps harder, warmth returning in faint trickles. But it costs energy, and energy is scarce. After minutes, you collapse again onto the straw, lungs burning, body no warmer than before. You're left panting, sweat mixing with icy damp, the cruelest combination. From the next cell, another prisoner groans. His voice is thin, barely human, a rasp pulled through frozen lungs. "They'll freeze us out," he mutters, words trailing. You don't know him, but you recognize the truth in his tone. Whether deliberate or careless, this place is designed for winter to finish what chains began. You tilt your head back against the wall, letting icy drops slide down your neck. You imagine the guards above by their fire, mugs of ale in hand, boasting about the buckets they've emptied tonight. Some may even keep wagers. Who will last longest? Who will perish by dawn? That's your quirky tidbit. Records exist of guards gambling over prisoner survival, treating human suffering as evening sport. You grimace at the thought, but it fits too well with their laughter. The minutes drag, each one colder than the last. You close your eyes and picture fire again, clinging to the memory of torchlight. Your mind paints it brighter, closer, hotter. You pretend the puddle is a warm bath instead of an icy swamp. The imagination stretches until, for a breath, you almost feel warm again. Almost. The N.A. rat scuttles past, wet whiskers dripping, and the illusion breaks. You sigh, curling tighter, body a knot of cold, soul balancing between despair and defiance. You whisper aloud, voice trembling, "You won't win tonight." Whether you mean the frost, the guards, or the dungeon itself, you're not sure. But speaking the words makes them real, and real words are sometimes stronger than the silence that kills. Joke 3 slips out as you lay your head back down. At least when I freeze solid, they can use me as a very realistic dungeon statue. The puddle soaks deeper into your straw. Rats scavenge freely, and your body trembles in rhythm with the drip of water. Yet you breathe still, and in the dungeon that counts as victory. You slump against the wall, the puddle creeping cold through your tunic, when another thought claws into your mind. This place feels less like a room and more like a refrigerator. You laugh weakly at the idea. What nobleman would design a prison to double as a pantry? Yet the more you think about it, the less absurd it sounds. The air here is sharper than in the corridors above. Every exhale fogs instantly, clinging to the stone before vanishing. You run your hand along the floor and find it colder than before, almost biting, as if the earth itself is hoarding frost. In one corner, you spot something that makes you pause, a tiny icicle hanging from a crack in the ceiling. Its tip glimmers faintly in the torchlight, like glass. You reach out, touch it, and flinch. Yes, real ice. You wonder if your cell was deliberately chosen for this, carved into a place where winter never loosens its grip. Castles often used underground rooms as natural coolers. Grain was stored in pits, wine in cellars, meat in stone chambers that kept the sun away. Historians still argue whether dungeons were sometimes repurposed food stores, or whether the opposite was true. Food stores turned into dungeons when space was needed. Either way, you're living proof of the crossover. You're not just a prisoner, you're someone else's salted pork. You shuffle forward, shackles clinking, and peer at the ground. The puddle you sat in earlier has hardened in places, its edges glazed with frost. You press your finger to it, and it crunches like thin glass. That's your mainstream fact. Medieval castles often suffered such cold in their lowest levels that liquids froze in winter, even without open air. For prisoners, that meant nights colder than the landscape outside. You picture the guards above, tucking into roasted venison stored in rooms just like this one. They had the luxury of meat preserved by the chi, all that now gnaws your flesh. The irony nearly makes you laugh. Joke 1. Great, I've been downgraded from prisoner to side of beef. Your eyes trace the ceiling, rough-hewn and dripping with condensation that freezes mid-fall. A stalactite of ice has begun to form near the bars, clear as crystal. You imagine it growing longer, sharper, until it touches the floor, a frozen spear birthed by your own misery. You wonder whether some future archaeologist will find it and marvel at how prisoners survived under such conditions. The walls themselves seem colder. You lean your back against one, then instantly recoil. The stone steals your warmth like a greedy thief, draining heat faster than you can make it. You realize the safest place is the straw, damp though it is, because stone is merciless. You spread more straw beneath you, layering it until it feels like insulation, flimsy but better than bare rock. Your thoughts drift to stories of oubliettes, pits where prisoners were lowered and forgotten. Some were so damp and cold that moss and ice thrived on their walls. Chroniclers describe them as death by chill, slow and unrelenting. You shiver harder, imagining yourself sliding into one, frost creeping over your eyelids. Historians still argue whether oubliettes were widespread or exaggerated, but the legend lingers. Sitting here, you believe them all. Another prisoner coughs across the corridor, a hacking sound echoing off ice-glossed stone. The sound reminds you that frost doesn't just numb, it kills. Pneumonia, frostbite, hypothermia, all seeded in places like this. You clutch your cloak tighter, whispering to yourself, "Not tonight." To distract yourself, you crawl toward the icicle again. You snap it free, the shard brittle in your fingers. You suck it, and the taste is surprisingly clean, purer than the water dripping from your ceiling. That's your quirky tidbit. In some dungeons, prisoners really did drink from icicles, using frozen water as their only clean source. You smirk at the thought, muttering, "Fine dining at the dungeon ice bar." Joke 2, cold as the shard itself. The icicle numbs your tongue, but at least it moistens your throat. You toss the stub aside and listen to it crack against stone, shattering into splinters. Another reminder that even ice doesn't last in here. It melts or breaks, vanishing before dawn. Your mind drifts to cellars again. You imagine barrels of ale stacked neatly where you now sit, monks rolling wheels of cheese across the same stones. The dungeon as a pantry, efficient and cruel. Perhaps your jailers saw no difference, whether it held meat or men. The stone preserved what was inside, and maybe, in a twisted way, that's the point. The torchlight outside flickers, revealing your breath in golden puffs. You exhale slowly, watching the mist curl, pretending it's smoke from a fire. You imagine sitting by a hearth, snow outside, ale in hand, icicles dripping harmlessly beyond the window. You let that vision cradle you until your shoulders ease. Joke 3. If imagination really did warm you, I'd be sweating by now. You curl tighter in your straw nest, puddle frozen stiff beneath, icicles hanging above. The dungeon has become an ice house, a prison within a pantry. You breathe, a slow and steady, whispering to yourself that you'll see morning, and in this freezer of stone and frost, whispering might be the only fire left. Your tongue still tingles from the icicle, but the feeling doesn't linger long before another sensation overtakes you, an ache in your chest. It begins as a scratchy cough, small and shallow, but each time you try to suppress it, it comes harder. You double over, hacking into the straw, your ribs shaking with the effort. The cold isn't just sitting on your skin anymore. It has moved inside you, burrowed deep into lungs and blood. You wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve, seeing nothing but spit glisten in the dim light. Relief for a moment, you half-expected blood. The cough rattles again, this time dragging a wheeze behind it. Your head feels light, your chest heavy. You recognize the danger. Cold nights don't just freeze, they breed sickness, pneumonia, frostbite, fevers, illnesses that in a warm bed might be survivable, but here, in this pit, become death sentences. You curl tighter, cloak wrapped around shoulders, but the cough shakes it loose. The prisoner across the corridor coughs too, the sound echoing like a duet of misery. You wonder how many here wheeze together in the dark, unseen but united by sickness. Historians note that medieval prisons were hotbeds of disease. Records speak of jail fever, now known as typhus, sweeping entire jail populations. That's your mainstream fact. Cold didn't just kill directly, it opened doors for illness to march in. You think of medieval remedies. If a physician were here, he'd likely press your wrist, peer at your tongue, then announce your humours are out of balance. Too much cold, too much phlegm, the cure, perhaps a bleeding or a syrup of horehound and honey, or hot possets made from milk and ale. You chuckle bitterly. Joke 1. Fantastic, I'm drowning in phlegm and the cure is losing more blood. Of course there's no physician here. Only rats, straw and scraps of cloth. You improvise as best you can, pulling. G the cloak tighter, burying your mouth in it to trap the warmth of your breath. Each cough now reverberates inside the fabric, shaking your chest like a drum. It's pitiful, but it works. The air you inhale after feels slightly warmer, slightly easier. You whisper thanks to the rag itself, a relic of sheep and weaver now serving as apothecary. Your ankles ache from the shackles. You lift them, studying skin rubbed raw, patches pale and blotched. You wiggle your toes, relieved they still move, though they're stiff. You imagine frostbite creeping in, the blackening of flesh, the stink of rot. Medieval accounts describe it in blunt terms. Fingers or toes sloughed away, leaving stumps. You picture yourself with blackened feet crawling instead of walking. The vision jolts you into stamping your boots against the stone, forcing blood to move. The sound echoes, irritating your neighbour. He growls something incoherent but then resumes, coughing himself. Maybe he understands, maybe he doesn't, but both of you stamp anyway, keeping death from creeping higher. You rub your arms, thinking of remedies peasants once used. Hot stones wrapped in cloth, bottles filled with warm water, herbal salves rubbed on the chest. You have none of these, but imagination again steps in. You picture sage smoke curling around you, thyme steeped in ale, honey sliding down your throat. The fantasy soothes your mind, if not your lungs. Historians still argue whether these remedies truly healed or only offered comfort. Tonight, comfort is cure enough. A memory surfaces. Monks writing recipes for winter sickness, mixing garlic with wine, steeping elderflower, applying poultices of onion and goose fat. You smile faintly, imagining the look on a guard's face if you asked for goose fat tonight. Joke 2. Yes, sir, forget the chains. Could I trouble you for a goose, plucked and fattened, preferably roasted? The cough rattles again, louder this time. You spit into the straw, hearing it splatter. The smell already sour, you don't care. The dungeon itself reeks. One more foul note hardly matters. You wonder if sickness is part of the design. Why bother executing prisoners if the cold will finish them? Perhaps neglect is cheaper than rope. Your head lolls against the wall, exhaustion dragging at you. Fever simmers faintly under your skin, a warmth that doesn't comfort but burns. You recognize the paradox. The cold makes you shiver, the fever makes you sweat, and between them, your body doesn't know which way is death. That's your quirky tidbit. Medieval physicians described fevers as inner fires, often treated with cooling diets of lettuce, cucumber, and water. You'd laugh if your throat weren't so dry. You whisper to yourself, delirious, fire inside, ice outside, seems fair. Joke 3 slips out. If I survive, I'm opening the first medieval sauna, guaranteed cure for all 4 humours. You close your eyes, drifting between coughs, and picture yourself, wrapped in furs by a fire, herbs steaming in a pot, honey wine on your lips. You know it's fantasy, but it warms your heart enough to fight another hour. The dungeon doesn't care. Frost still creeps, coughs still echo, rats still scavenge. But you are alive, lungs rattling, breath fogging, body refusing to surrender. And in a place built for sickness, stubbornness is the only medicine left. Your cough fades to a hoarse rasp and you slump back into the straw, chest aching. The torchlight outside is weaker now, as if the night itself is tired of shining. You close your eyes, expecting only more shivers and more rats, when you hear something unusual, a whisper at the bars. You lift your head, squinting. A guard leans close, eyes darting up and down the corridor. He slips something through the gap. Small, folded cloth, heavier than it looks. Your heart lurches, you snatch it quickly, hiding it under your cloak. Inside is a scrap of fur, coarse but real, and a stub of candle, wick unlit. You gape at the offering, then at him. He smirks, finger pressed to lips, and walks away. You clutch the fur to your face, breathing in its animal smell. It's not much, a fragment, perhaps a ratty strip from some noble's trimming, but it's softer and warmer than anything you've held in weeks. You drape it around your neck, and warmth spreads instantly, small but fierce, as if your body remembers what comfort feels like. Joke 1. Finally, a fashion upgrade, dungeon chic, featuring eau de goat. The candle stub, though, is a greater treasure. You hide it in the straw for now, knowing that without fire, it's only potential. Still, just seeing it makes your chest swell. A candle is light, heat, and hope bundled into one. In the medieval world, wax was precious, often reserved for churches or nobility. Tallow candles made of animal fat smoked and stank, but they were warmth in solid form. To have even a stub in your cell feels like wealth. That's your mainstream fact. Candles were symbols of status and survival, often rationed carefully in times of scarcity. You wonder why the guard helped you. Pity? A bribe owed to someone else? Or maybe he's just bored, playing at mercy for once. Historians still argue whether guards ever cared for prisoners or whether tales of kindness are rare exceptions. Tonight, you don't question too hard. Mercy, whatever its reason, deserves gratitude. You tuck the fur tighter and glance around. Other prisoners have noticed. One mutters, envious, another coughs jealously. You lower your eyes, trying not to provoke, but inside your spirit glows brighter than your cell. You've been given tools, however meager, to fight the cold. Tools mean possibility, and possibility means life. Your mind drifts to other stories of smuggled comforts. There are records of guards slipping prisoners bread, wine, even writing materials. In some cases, bribes bought whole cloaks or blankets. In others, it was simply scraps of wool or a handful of straw. You imagine the secret economy thriving in shadows, coins for comfort, whispers for warmth. That's your quirky tidbit. Contraband wasn't always daggers or files. Sometimes it was blankets and candles, more valuable than weapons when frost was your true enemy. You shift in your straw, adjusting the fur. It scratches, but it insulates, trapping the heat from your skin. You close your eyes, pretending you wear a noble's mantle, lined with sable or ermine. You picture yourself walking into a great hall, torchlight gleaming, the fur around your shoulders a mark of dignity. Joke 2. Of course, in reality, my ermine smells like wet goat and probably still has fleas. The candle stub burns in your thoughts. You crave to light it, to see its flame chase shadows from the cell, to feel even a drop of wax warm your fingers. But you hold back. Timing is survival. If you light it now, it may be gone before dawn. Better to wait for the coldest hour when despair is deepest. Candles are companions, and companions deserve patience. You tuck it deeper into the straw, whispering to yourself as if it can hear. Not yet, but soon. The thought steadies you. For the first time tonight, you feel you have a choice. Not a good choice, but choice nonetheless. When to summon fire, when to summon light. In the dungeon, that is power. You press the fur tighter around your face, inhaling its musky scent. The warmth seeps into your collarbone, down your chest. Your cough eases slightly, soothed by the heat. You whisper thanks to the guard, though he cannot hear. Then you whisper thanks to the fur itself, as though it were a relic. Medieval minds often blessed objects, believing them carriers of grace. Tonight, you join them. A rat creeps closer, curious about your new treasure. You swat it gently, guarding your fur with the fierceness of a noble defending jewels. You chuckle softly. Joke 3. Imagine freezing in a dungeon, but refusing to share your goat scarf with the local rat aristocracy. The night drags on, but now you face it differently. The fur is your shield, the candle your sword, hidden but ready. You curl deeper into your straw clee, oak wrapped close, fur at your throat, candle tucked beneath. For once you feel almost rich, and in the frozen dark, almost rich is enough to keep breathing. The fur at your throat keeps some of the frost at bay, but your mind refuses to rest. Each rattle of chains, each drip from the ceiling reminds you where you are. Your body may be trapped, but your imagination breaks free, wandering through cracks in the stone. It begins with a whisper, escape. You glance at the bars, thick iron, blackened by smoke and damp. Your fingers graze them, as if testing for weakness. Of course they hold strong. No prisoner tears them open by hand. Yet you can't help staring at the faint gap between iron and stone, wondering if centuries of frost have loosened it. Historians still argue whether escape stories were exaggerated or rare strokes of genius. You, lying in straw, choose to believe them all. You picture yourself wriggling through that gap. Skin scraped raw but free, crawling through corridors lined with dripping stone. You imagine running barefoot across the courtyard, breath fogging, guards shouting, and then, in your fantasy, you scale the battlements like a thief of legend, hands gripping icy stone, pulling yourself up toward the open sky. Joke 1. Of course, in reality, I'd probably slip on the first rock, break my nose, and beg to be let back inside the dungeon for safety. You laugh softly, the sound strange in the silence, but your mind refuses to let go. You imagine slipping past guards asleep at their posts, their mugs of ale tipped over, cloaks pulled high against the cold. You picture the drawbridge lowered for some midnight errand, the gates yawning wide, freedom laid open like a feast. In your vision, snow crunches under your feet. You run into the woods beyond the castle, branches clawing at your cloak. The air outside isn't warm, but it feels different, wild, sharp, alive. The stars above glitter like silver nails hammered into black velvet. You breathe deep, chest swelling, frost-burned lungs forgetting their A. You smile at the thought because freedom, even imagined, is warmer than any cloak. That's your mainstream fact. Prisoners often survived by daydreaming, building castles of the mind while chained in real ones. Some wrote of escapes in letters, others carved wings or ladders into walls, symbols of flight even when flesh stayed trapped. You close your eyes and see ladders drawn in chalk, wings sprouting from shoulders, ropes spun from straw. You join that tradition, dreaming with the desperate. But imagination can be cruel too. You picture yourself caught mid-climb, dragged back by guards, punished with tighter chains, harsher cold. You see torches flaring, dogs barking, the dream crumbling like frost underfoot. You sigh, whispering, "Not tonight." Still the vision lingers, comforting in its impossibility. Your neighbour stirs, muttering in his sleep. The word escape slips from his cracked lips too. You realize you're not alone in your fantasies. Every prisoner here has rehearsed the same script, crawling through tunnels, bribing guards, scaling walls. It's a chorus of silent hopes sung nightly in cells across the dungeon. You wonder how many succeeded. Chroniclers record daring tales, men tunneling with spoons, others hiding in dung carts, some disguising themselves in guards' cloaks. A few lived to tell the tale, most didn't. Historians still argue whether these stories are truth or legend. You whisper to yourself, legend warms better than fact, and let the thoughts settle like embers in your chest. Your hands fiddle with the chain at your ankles. Could it be filed with a shard of stone? Could the straw conceal a tool? You know it's foolish, but the questions themselves feel like rebellion. Even without answers, the act of imagining resistance keeps the cold from fully conquering you. Joke 2. If I ever do escape, I'll write a manual. How not to freeze before you even reach the gate. You stretch out again, cloak and fur wrapped close, and let your eyes close. The escape fantasy grows vivid, weaving into a dream. In it, you slip through cracks in the wall, swim a moat glazed with ice, and drag yourself onto the far bank. You collapse beneath a tree, its branches skeletal, but you feel free. You whisper thanks to the tree, to the moon above, even to the rats left behind. But the dream twists. In it, you wake in snow, alone, no fire, no food, frost seeping deeper than any dungeon. Freedom becomes another kind of prison. You shiver even in the dream, realizing survival isn't just leaving the cell, it's enduring the world beyond. You wake with a start, shaking your head, muttering, even imagination comes with a catch. That's your quirky tidbit, medieval East. APs often died quickly in the wilderness, frost or starvation finishing what chains had begun. Freedom wasn't always salvation. Sometimes, paradoxically, the dungeon outlasted the world outside. You lie back, eyes open now, staring at the ceiling's dripping cracks. Perhaps escape is for dreams only, but dreams are still worth having. They fill the hours, warm the mind, and remind you there's a world beyond the frost. Joke 3, muttered with a grin. Well, at least in my imagination, I outran the guards, climbed the walls, and still had time to wave at them from the forest. Not bad for a man chained to straw. The dungeon remains dark, damp, unyielding, yet your heart beats steadier, carried by visions of flight. Maybe you'll never leave these walls, but tonight you've already escaped in spirit, and sometimes spirit is enough. The dream of escape lingers as you blink back into the present, the cold rushing in again like an unwelcome tide. Your shackles remain, the walls loom, and the straw beneath is as damp as ever. Yet your mind feels sharper now, sparked by imagining freedom. You sit up slowly, rubbing your ankles, and another thought creeps in, not about escaping, but about why you suffer this way. Is the dungeon's cold an accident of stone and season, or was it always intended as punishment? You've heard both sides. Some say dungeons were merely storage spaces, not designed for cruelty, and prisoners froze simply because castles lacked spare blankets. Others insist the frost was deliberate, a weapon as sharp as any sword. Historians still argue whether freezing prisoners was purposeful torment or careless neglect. You sit here, breath fogging, and wonder which truth fits. Your eyes trace the bars, black against faint torchlight. If this were negligence, it would feel easier somehow, less personal. Yet the bucket of icy water thrown earlier whispers otherwise. You smirk bitterly. Joke one. Hard to call it an accident when someone just drenched me like a medieval houseplant. Still, the debate churns in your head. Nobles upstairs wrapped themselves in furs, feasted by blazing hearths. They knew the cold's bite. They feared it enough to line halls with tapestries and spread rushes thick on floors. So why wouldn't they understand what it meant to throw men into damp stone pits with nothing? Perhaps they did, and that was the point. Cold was cheap, relentless, invisible. It killed without swords, without trials, without blame. You lean back against the wall, pressing your head to the stone. The chill seeps instantly, as if the dungeon itself listens to your thoughts, answering with silence. You imagine the builders long ago, masons carving blocks, overseers directing. Did they think, this corner will hold meat, or this corner will hold men? The distinction blurs in stone. Your thoughts wander to records of prison reform centuries later, when writers decried jail fever and filth. They described men crammed in pits, half-naked, freezing, coughing until they dropped. Some reformers argued these conditions weren't mere oversight, they were slow executions disguised as incarceration. That's your mainstream fact. Many early modern critics believed medieval dungeons deliberately weaponized cold and neglect. But then another memory surfaces. Accounts of castles too poor to feed prisoners well, too strapped for resources to provide more than straw. Guards themselves often shivered on night watch, their cloaks thin, their boots cracked. Perhaps prisoners froze because everyone froze except the richest few. You picture a guard stamping his feet outside, cursing the same frost you curse. The thought blurs the line between cruelty and poverty. The prisoner across the corridor coughs again, his body racked. You study him through the gloom, gaunt face, beard stiff with frost. He whispers something, though you barely hear. Cold, punishment. The words trail off. He believes it's deliberate. You wonder if he's right. You scratch your arms, lice biting, straw prickling. Neglect feels like insult. Cruelty feels like war. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin. Joke two. Heads, they forget about you. Tails, they freeze you on purpose. Either way, you lose the toss. Your stomach growls faintly, but hunger is quieter now, dulled by exhaustion. The real battle is temperature. You rub your hands together, breath steaming between them, and watch the vapor vanish. You mutter aloud, is this neglect or design? Your voice echoes, swallowed by stone, no answer given. You picture nobles debating above. One insists the dungeon is simply cold by nature, another argues it's a fine deterrent. They sip wine as they argue, wrapped in furs, oblivious to the irony. Historians still argue much the same. Some call dungeons myths exaggerated by later writers, others call them calculated machines of suffering. The truth likely lies, as always, between. Your mind drifts again, inventing dialogue for those long dead masons. One says, we need a room for storage. Another replies, make it deep, the cold will keep food. A third laughs, it'll keep men too. They all nod, satisfied. Joke 3. And just like that, they invented the world's first multi-purpose freezer/prison. You shift again, pulling your fur tighter, hiding the candle stub beneath your straw. If cruelty was the plan, then the candle becomes defiance, a spark against their design. If neglect was the truth, then the candle is simply a patch in the system's cracks. Either way, it matters. You lean your head back, closing your eyes, letting frost creep across your lips. Whether deliberate or careless, whether cruelty or neglect, you're still breathing. And breath for tonight is the only victory that counts. You cough again, the sound rattling off the walls, and shift deeper into the straw. The fur around your neck keeps a trace of warmth alive, but your body begs for more. That's when you remember the whispered stories you once heard from older prisoners, the strange tricks men used to survive winter nights in places like this, tricks that sounded ridiculous at the time, but ridiculous is better than frozen. You sit up, shackles dragging, and reach for a handful of straw. Instead of spreading it as bedding, you stuff it into your tunic, pushing it down against your chest, belly, even your sleeves. The stalks scratch, stabbing like needles, but instantly you feel the difference. Pockets of air trap between straw and cloth, your body heat swirling in tiny chambers. You grin despite yourself. Joke 1. So this is what it feels like to cosplay as a scarecrow. You keep stuffing until you're lumpy and absurd, your tunic bulging awkwardly. You imagine how you'd look in torchlight, half prisoner, half haystack, and laugh quietly. The sound feels good in your throat, even if it's hoarse. The trick works, though. Your ribs ache less, your shivers soften. Somewhere, whoever first thought of this might be smiling smugly across centuries. Then you remember another rumor: mud. Prisoners smeared mud across their skin to block drafts, the dried layer sealing heat in like crude armor. You glance at the puddle near your straw, its edges still glazed with ice. The thought makes you gag, filthy water, disease waiting, but desperation tempts you. You scoop a little, smearing it across your forearm. It's slimy, shocking cold at first, but as it dries, it stiffens, becoming a thin crust. You flex your arm, wincing. Joke 2. Ah yes, the medieval spa experience. Mud mask minus the cucumber slices. You stop short of covering your chest. One arm is enough for the experiment. Still, you marvel at how absurd survival can look. A straw-stuffed tunic, mud-streaked skin, a fur scrap at your neck, like some half-forgotten creature cobbled together in desperation. Yet the absurdity comforts you. Action feels better than despair. You recall another story too, men using their own breath as blankets. You've already hidden your face in your cloak before, but now you take it further. You build a straw tent over your lap, then exhale long and steady beneath it, trapping the mist until the little cave grows warm. Soon your thighs feel like they're basking in a tiny hearth. That's your mainstream fact. Humans have always improvised with insulation, whether Eskimos in snow houses or peasants burying themselves in straw piles to survive. You exhale again, steady, rhythmic. Each breath makes the cave warmer. You imagine yourself as a bellows, fueling a forge of survival. It's pitiful, but it works. You think about other odd tales. Prisoners stuffing moss into boots, tying cloth strips around heads, even chewing garlic cloves to heat the blood. Some swore by drinking strong wine, others by singing loudly to chase frost away. Historians still argue whether these were effective or merely folklore. Yet sitting here, half scarecrow, half mud statue, you know that even belief itself carries warmth. You start humming under your breath, testing the theory. The sound fills the cell, low and steady, buzzing against your chest. You imagine the vibrations shaking heat loose as though your ribs are a drum. Joke 3. Look at me, one-man band playing the hit single Please Don't Freeze Tonight. The humming soothes you even as your neighbour coughs across the corridor. He hears, then chuckles weakly, rasping, "Sing louder, maybe we'll both thaw." You grin, humming louder, turning the dungeon into a faint concert hall of wheezy notes. You pause to scratch at your straw-stuffed tunic. Fleas bite harder now, thrilled with their new environment. But you accept it, better itching than freezing. Each compromise is a victory of sorts. You whisper to yourself, better alive and itchy than dead and neat. Your pa. Hands press against the straw bulge on your belly. It feels ridiculous, yet somehow noble, as though centuries of desperate survivors have passed their knowledge to you. That's your quirky tidbit. Survival tricks often outlived the men themselves, whispered down in stories until they became folklore, half legend, half manual. You are living one of those legends now, absurd and real all at once. The torchlight outside flares briefly, guards passing, and you freeze. You worry they'll notice your stuffed tunic and laugh, maybe strip it away. But they don't stop, don't even glance in. You sigh, relieved, clutching your straw closer. Sometimes secrecy is warmth's greatest ally. You lean back, mud crust drying on your arm, straw crinkling in your tunic, breath fogging beneath your cloak. You feel like a patchwork experiment, stitched together from scraps and rumours, yet your body trembles less, your heart beats steadier. You whisper, not elegant, but alive, and in this dungeon, that's all that matters. Your humming fades, leaving only the drip of water and the scuttle of rats. But the silence grows too heavy, pressing on your chest like another chain. You realize what's missing. Sound, laughter, distraction. Cold gnaws harder when your mind has nothing to bite back with. You clear your throat, hoarse but willing, and mutter, "Well then, who's ready for a concert?" Across the corridor a prisoner coughs, then chuckles. Another voice farther down grumbles, "Better than silence." Encouraged, you hum again, this time shaping the tune into a melody you half remember from market days. It's clumsy, off-key, but it fills the dungeon. You add nonsense words, mumbling verses about straw mattresses and frozen stew. Joke 1. Behold the first draft of our hit single, Shackles and Chill. A few prisoners laugh, weak but real. The sound bounces off stone, warmer than any fire. You feel the change immediately. Humour, however ragged, spreads like heat. In this place, laughter is rebellion. You keep going, making up verses, one about guards tripping over their own buckets, another about rats demanding better rent conditions, a third about fleas holding tournaments on your legs. Each line earns a snort, a cough that turns into a chuckle. The dungeon becomes less tomb, more tavern. That's your mainstream fact. Medieval prisoners often sang together, their voices carrying not just for morale but to remind guards and townsfolk above that they still lived. Singing was survival, as essential as food. You switch from song to story. Your voice lowers into a mock-serious tone as you invent a tale. Once there was a noble who froze in his own castle because he was too proud to wear straw in his doublet. His ghost still wanders the halls, muttering, "Should have listened to the peasants." Laughter ripples, even from the man who coughed earlier. Then another prisoner joins in, his voice crow. Act but strong. He begins a story about a guard so stupid he tried to drink candle wax, thinking it was ale. The group erupts again, the cold forgotten for a minute. You realize this is more than entertainment. It's a furnace built from words. You lean back, straw rustling, and whisper to yourself, "We're warming the air with stories." Joke 2. And best of all, not a single rat demanded a cover charge. Your thoughts drift to medieval taverns, people crammed together, drinking ale, singing bawdy songs, telling tales until dawn. Maybe dungeons, in their strange way, mimic that closeness. No ale, no fire, but the principle is the same. Voices against silence, community against frost. You recall a quirky tidbit. In some jails, prisoners created entire plays, acted out in straw and shadow, mocking their captors. Guards often ignored it, thinking it harmless. You smile, imagining your own troupe forming here. Straw crowns, rat actors, a stage lit by candle stubs. Even in chains, humanity insists on theatre. Your humming fades, leaving only the drip of water and the scuttle of rats. But the silence grows too heavy, pressing on your chest like another chain. You realize what's missing. Sound, laughter, distraction. Cold gnaws harder when your mind has nothing to bite back with. You clear your throat, hoarse but willing, and mutter, "Well then, who's ready for a concert?" Across the corridor, a prisoner coughs, then chuckles. Another voice farther down grumbles, "Better than silence." Encouraged, you hum again, this time shaping the tune into a melody you half remember from market days. It's clumsy, off-key, but it fills the dungeon. You add nonsense words, mumbling verses about straw mattresses and frozen stew. Joke 1. Behold the first draft of our hit single, Shackles and Chill. A few prisoners laugh, weak but real. The sound bounces off stone, warmer than any fart and bomb. Here, you feel the change immediately. Humour, however ragged, spreads like heat. In this place, laughter is rebellion. You keep going, making up verses. One about guards tripping over their own buckets. Another about rats demanding better rent conditions. A third about fleas holding tournaments on your legs. Each line earns a snort, a cough that turns into a chuckle. The dungeon becomes less tomb, more tavern. That's your mainstream fact. Medieval prisoners often sang together, their voices carrying not just for morale but to remind guards and townsfolk above that they still lived. Singing was survival, as essential as food. You switch from song to story, your voice lowers into a mock-serious tone as you invent a tale. Once there was a noble who froze in his own castle because he was too proud to wear straw in his doublet. His ghost still wanders the halls, muttering, "Should have listened to the peasants." Laughter ripples, even from the man who coughed earlier. Then another prisoner joins in, his voice cracked but strong. He begins a story about a guard so stupid he tried to drink candle wax, thinking it was ale. The group erupts again, the cold forgotten for a minute. You realize this is more than entertainment, it's a furnace built from words. You lean back, straw rustling, and whisper to yourself, "We're warming the air with stories." Joke 2. And best of all, not a single rat demanded a cover charge. Your thoughts drift to medieval taverns, people crammed together, drinking ale, singing bawdy songs, telling tales until dawn. Maybe dungeons, in their strange way, mimic that closeness. No ale, no fire, but the principle is the same. Voices against silence, community against frost. You recall a quirky tidbit. In some jails, prisoners created entire plays, acted out in straw and shadow, mocking their captors. Guards often ignored it, thinking it harmless. You smile, imagining your own troupe forming here. Straw crowns, rat actors, a stage lit by candle stubs, even in chains. Humanity insists on theatre. Your voice grows steadier. You start another song, slower this time, more like a lullaby. The melody drifts through the corridor, soft as breath. Words don't matter. The tune itself carries comfort. You imagine mothers in cottages, humming children to sleep under fur blankets, while here, prisoners hum each other into survival. The coughs soften, replaced by rhythmic breaths. Some men sleep, others hum along, their tones weaving into yours. The dungeon resonates, not with despair, but with fragile harmony. You close your eyes, letting the sound rock you gently, as if on waves. Joke 3. If historians ever dig up these walls, I hope they record that our band's name was the Frost-Bitten Choir. You chuckle, then drift into quiet, satisfied. The cold is still there, biting and cruel, but it feels less sharp now. Laughter dulled its edge, song wrapped it in cloth. You settle deeper into straw, humming one last note as your eyelids grow heavy. For the first time in hours, you're not merely surviving, you're living, however briefly, in music and camaraderie. Your song drifts into silence, and with it, the dungeon's noise subsides. Sleep comes in fragments, minutes at a time, broken by coughs, rat scurries, or the shift of chains. When you stir again, it's not the sounds that wake you, but the faintest intrusion of light. Not firelight this time, but something paler, softer, steadier. Morning. You blink, eyes gritty, and lift your head. Through the narrow slit high in the wall, a thin blade of daylight pierces the cell. It's not warmth. No, the air is still knife cold. But the sight of it is different. The light carries possibility. It spills across the floor, catching the frost, turning it into a carpet of diamonds. You exhale and watch your breath sparkle in the beam, a ghost dancing briefly before fading. You stretch your legs, the shackles clanking, the straw crunches beneath you, stiff now from frozen water. When you rise, every muscle complains, but you force yourself to stand. The floor numbs your soles instantly. You shuffle into the beam of light, holding your hands out as though the sun could leap down and cradle them. Joke 1. Note to self: sunlight in dungeons is mostly decorative. Still, you savor it. Even the weakest daylight proves time moves forward. You survived another night. That realization warms you more than the light itself. You let your shoulders sag, tension draining, and mutter, "I'm still here." From the corridor comes a groan as another prisoner wakes. His cough sounds worse, thick and wet. He mutters something you can't make out, then falls quiet. You wonder if he sees the same light from his slit. Maybe that beam touches each cell differently, a wandering visitor. Maybe it's the only mercy the dungeon offers, divided equally, one shaft per man. You glance at the frozen puddle near your straw. Its surface glitters now, reflecting the daylight like glass. You crouch and run a finger across it. Cold, brittle, but oddly beautiful. You chuckle softly. Joke 2. Who knew my prison cell came with its own winter wonderland? You break the ice and bring a shard to your lips. It's clean, sharp, sliding down your throat like mountain spring water. For a moment you feel almost refreshed. You remember reading, or maybe hearing, how ice and frost were once harvested and stored for nobles, considered luxuries in summer. Upstairs, they might chill wine with what freezes you now. That's your mainstream fact. In some medieval courts, snow and ice were stored in pits, carried from mountains to serve the rich. The irony makes you laugh bitterly. You sit again, shackles clinking, and let the sunlight stripe your face. It softens the dungeon's gloom, painting golden lines across the walls. You notice details you missed before, scratches in the mortar, initials carved, even a crude drawing of a bird, its wings spread wide, etched by some earlier prisoner dreaming of flight. You trace the lines with your finger, whispering, "Good choice." Historians still argue whether such graffiti was rebellion, prayer, or just boredom, but to you it feels like solidarity. The light climbs slowly, moving up the wall, shrinking from the floor. You shuffle closer, greedy to keep it, but the slit is high and soon the beam angles out of reach. You sigh, watching it fade. Morning doesn't linger here. It teases, then leaves. Your neighbor stirs again, muttering, "Daylight." His voice is cracked, but his tone carries relief. You answer softly, "We made it." He chuckles, then coughs, the sound thick. Still, you hear the faint smile in it. Daylight, however brief, lifts both your spirits. You stretch your arms, joints stiff, and notice frost still clings to the bars. Your breath fogs against them, leaving tiny crystals. You laugh under your breath, whispering, "My cell decorates itself." Joke throw. If I survive long enough, maybe I'll sell frost art. Limited edition Dungeon Originals. The beam is gone now, leaving only the memory of light. Yet the dungeon feels different, less eternal. You know another day has begun, another night conquered, another frost endured. You curl back into your straw, fur at your throat, candle still hidden, and whisper, "Not beaten yet." The cold remains, the shackles bite, the rats scurry, but daylight came, however briefly. And in this frozen tomb, even a sliver of sun is victory enough. The pale morning beam fades and the dungeon returns to its familiar gloom. Yet the memory of that light clings to you like a fragile ember. You sit back down, fur scrap pulled tighter, and feel the weight of exhaustion settling into every bone. Night may have passed, but survival isn't finished. It never is. Your body aches from the endless shivering, every muscle sore as if you'd marched miles instead of lying chained. Your stomach knots again, hunger gnawing harder now that the faint warmth of broth is long gone. You cough into your sleeve, the sound wet and rasping. The air still tastes of mildew, straw, and iron. But beneath all that misery lies a stubborn pulse. You survived another night in a dungeon that was half prison, half freezer. That counts for something. You close your eyes, whispering to yourself, "Alive is enough." The man across the corridor coughs again, weaker than before. You glance at him through the gloom. His eyes are closed, his lips bluish. For a moment fear prickles. Did he not last the night? Then his chest rises faintly. Relief floods you. You're both still here. Survival is rarely solitary, even if no words are spoken. You think of the strange methods you used, stuffing straw in your tunic, smearing mud on your arm, singing songs to chase the silence. Each absurd trick bought you another hour, each hour stacked into survival. Historians might argue about cruelty or neglect, about whether prisoners froze, it by accident or design. But you know the truth from inside. Survival was built from scraps, jokes, prayers, even rats. You rub your ankle where the shackle bites deepest. The skin there is raw, but you smile bitterly. "Still hurts," you murmur. Pain means blood still flows, and blood means life. Joke 1. Congratulations, ankles. You're officially the dungeon's least glamorous jewelry model. You close your eyes, drifting briefly into daydream. You imagine stepping outside the dungeon doors. You picture frost melting on your skin, sun warming your face, fresh air filling your lungs. You imagine bread warm from the oven, a cloak without holes, boots that don't leak. The fantasy is simple, almost childish, yet it soothes more than any candle flame could. Your thoughts wander to how prisoners were remembered. Some left carvings on walls, some were mentioned in chronicles, most were forgotten entirely. Maybe you'll leave no mark, or maybe the candle stub hidden in your straw will one day be found, puzzling some future historian. That's your mainstream fact. Prisons rarely recorded the lives of common captives. Their stories survive mostly through traces, graffiti, bones, scraps of cloth. You touch the etched bird on your wall again, honouring the nameless hand that drew it. The air in the dungeon shifts slightly, warmer by a fraction, perhaps because daylight has touched the castle stones. You breathe deeper, imagining that warmth reaching you. It's faint, but your body notices. You whisper, "Morning has its own mercy." Then comes the shuffle of boots. A guard walks past, glancing in. He doesn't sneer this time, doesn't laugh. He only nods faintly, then continues. Perhaps he too is weary from the cold. Perhaps he knows what you've endured, or perhaps you've imagined compassion where none exists. Joke 2. When a guard nods instead of throwing water, you know standard. Sarlo, your neighbour stirs again, rasping, "Another night done." His voice is little more than a breath. You answer softly, "Yes, we're still here." The words feel ceremonial, like a prayer repeated each dawn. Surviving is ritual. You curl into your straw again, fur tight, candle safe. You don't light it, not yet, maybe not ever. Just knowing it's there, hidden, gives you strength. Sometimes hope shines even when unlit. Your mind replays the night. The frozen walls, the torch beyond reach, the rat's warmth, the prayers, the cruel laughter of guards, the fantasy of escape. Each memory hurts, but together they form a story of endurance. You realize something. The dungeon hasn't beaten you. It tried with frost, with hunger, with silence, and yet here you sit, alive. Joke 3. If survival were a game, I think I've just unlocked the achievement. Shivered all night, still complaining. You chuckle, voice raw, but it feels good. Laughter, even weak, is rebellion. Your eyelids grow heavy again, not the panicked half-sleep of the night, but a steadier drowsiness, the kind that comes with morning when fear loosens its grip. You settle deeper into your straw, pulling the fur closer, breathing slow. And as you drift, one thought anchors you. Survival costs everything, but each dawn paid in frost proves you are still human. Now, as the last images fade, let the dungeon grow softer in your mind. Imagine the frost on the walls melting into harmless dew, dripping quietly until the air feels clean. The rats vanish back into their burrows, their squeaks dissolving into silence. The straw beneath you becomes lighter, less prickly, more like a bed waiting for rest. The chains around your ankles loosen, slipping away without a sound. Your wrists are free, your shoulders lighter. The stone walls open gently, not with force, but with kindness, revealing a wide sky beyond. In that sky, the first warmth of the sun spreads golden across your skin. You breathe, and the air is no longer sharp. It's smooth, soft, carrying the scent of wood smoke and bread. Let your chest rise and fall slowly, the cough's gone, the ache eased. Each breath carries away the night's misery, leaving only calm. You feel the ghost of laughter, of songs hummed in darkness, but now they linger as comfort, not desperation. The voices of fellow prisoners fade into a peaceful hush, as if they, too, have found rest. The candle stub in your straw flickers to life in your imagination. Its flame is steady, gentle, never burning out. It fills the cell, then the castle, then the entire night with a golden glow. That light becomes your blanket, wrapping you in safety. As you drift, remind yourself, you endured, you outlasted frost, silence, cruelty, and fear. The dungeon is behind you now, just a story to carry into sleep. Let your body grow heavy, your mind quiet. The journey is finished for tonight. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, you are safe here in the warmth of your own imagination.